Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Dr. Veronica Riera-Gilley of Prairie Fire Pharmacy Consulting, and we're here tonight for Embracing Mortality. And our guest speaker tonight is Angel Brownlee. She is the founder of Temple Road Journey, and she's also an end-of-life care doula. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight. So, Angel, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Well, I'm a yoga therapist first, so my natural go-to is to have us all get into our bodies. So if I can invite you to sit back in your chair and just let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Just take a moment to feel the ground beneath your feet. We come into this shared space together and notice that we're breathing. And just welcome the breath. The breath is our most intimate relationship. And as you breathe, just notice the breath without trying to change it. Notice sensations in your body. You may even feel your heartbeat. And for a moment, just recognize that you are supported. You're supported by this group, by your breath, by the space you're in, by your loved ones, by life itself. Just breathe that in. And allow any concerns to just leave your body, your mind. And together, let's take a nice, big, deliberate inhale. And exhale, sigh the breath out. Okay. So I always feel like I'm not ready until I'm really ready, like in my body. I don't know, Veronica, if you have any questions that you wanted to ask me, or if we were just going to kind of just go through and talk a little bit about how I became a doula. I guess that would be a good place to start.
Yeah.
So does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds really good. We might start with telling people what end-of-life doula is, and then how you became one.
Wonderful. Okay. So an end-of-life doula is part of the support team for hospice and palliative care as well. And so we come in as a support for the family and for the person who is dying. And it's really more than anything, it's having the ability to be completely present and listening and sensing into what is not being spoken oftentimes. And so a doula is very sensitive typically to the needs and the care that's called for. And we love to work with, I personally love to work with hospice because they are really, most of them are really taxed. They're going from one patient to the next, and a care doula or an end-of-life doula can usually spend more time with the patient and with the family. And so it really is a wonderful, addition. Every hospice I've ever worked with has really welcomed that support. And it's being able to show up for maybe 3 hours and sit with them, or in my case, I do energy work and breath work with them. I always try to remember that as long as we're living, our body needs to move in some way. And so we work with that. And that's where I think my role as a doula is a little bit different, just because of the yoga therapy piece. However, being in that environment where emotions are often really heightened, you have to have your own self-care practice. And so that's another piece of being a doula that's so important is that the more you do your own work, the more available you can be and sensitive you can be to the families and what they need. I'm also a hospice volunteer. And so I've been volunteering since, I can't even remember. My son was, I think, in kindergarten, my youngest, and he's 20. And so I started out that way, you know, and I didn't know what to do. Like, I was like, I had no, like, I was just a volunteer, and I would just like wanted to touch people and, you know, help them feel better. But I really didn't have any skills. You know what I mean? I hadn't really, the yoga I was doing back then was really like, it was just a little bit more physical. And so I didn't have that piece. And so I believe it was 2016, I went to become an end-of-life doula with Deanna Cochran. And she owns Quality of Life Care. And that was really pivotal because I got to feel, you know, it was almost like a homecoming. I was like, oh, okay, that's what it is, you know, a doula. And it's just someone that is just so wonderful at holding space in their heart for everything to be as it is, and then find ways to navigate and make maybe things flow a little bit more smoothly. But the first thing I always think of is don't go in thinking that you know. And, you know, I can't do that. I have to go in like just fresh and meet the moment. And I'm more comfortable with that now than I was back in the day when I started, before I had that doula training and before I had experience with, you know, working with the body and the emotions. And yeah, it's definitely a growing field. I think people are realizing the need of having a doula there. And what's so cool is that a doula can play so many different roles, like where my role as a doula is to do movement and breath and energy work. Another doula might be there to specialize in planning, like maybe that's where their gifts lie, are in, you know, like checking things off the list or organizing things. And Mandy can tell you that's not my strong suit. But it's really cool. And then you've got some people that choose to be a doula and just hold vigil, right? So that would be when the person is passing and just staying there through that time. And I've done that as well, which like Angela said, it's quite an honor to be there in that moment of transition. It's definitely a holy moment. You know, I was thinking about this talk tonight, and I realized that there's seasons in life where sometimes our work is calling us to grief more. And between the end of 2018 and 2019, I worked with 8 different families. And I don't know how I did it. I think it was the grace of God. I know it was the grace of God that got me through it. But it just seemed like I was being called again and again. And when it was all over in that way for that season, you know, COVID hit. And then we had 3 devastating losses in our family. And so I was so thankful, right, that I had been kind of put, what I feel like was like put in the kind of the crucible of things, like where it's like, I didn't know whether I was coming or going sometimes. And my faith is definitely central to everything I do in this work. And I realized that I was being prepared in that season that felt so hard in working with families. It actually came into my family, which was, you know, I believe it helped a lot. And to be able to not be afraid of talking about death, as you said, Veronica, it's like, you know, death is not the opposite of life. You know, life and death are like, to me, they're like 2 sides of the same coin. And we die many times, even in this life, you know, beyond the ultimate. And so I just think it's made me more authentic in my way of sharing yoga. Like I don't have to feel like I have to impress anybody by having the answers, because I know I don't. I've been there and I know I don't. And it's humbling, I guess, is the main thing I could say about that. And beautiful. I've seen miracles, of course. The times when, a mother is waiting for her daughter to drive across the country, and I know that she's waiting to say goodbye, and yet she's not conscious. I mean, and then her daughter gets there and everybody surrounds her and she passes, and it's a treasure, honestly. Feel very fortunate to do what I do.
So as a doula, then you're there to support the families and find out what they really need and support them as they walk through this journey of their family member passing on to the next life.
Right. And listen, and let them be angry or let them feel, like, don't try to insert yourself in telling them what they feel, like letting them feel what they feel. We don't find many environments where that's okay, where someone's not trying to fix us. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And this is not that place. This is that place of just, humility keeps coming up for me. And I really do feel like that it is having knowledge, and I'm not shying away from the fact that it does take expertise in some ways, but it's not necessarily in what you can learn from a book or studying. It's something that you learn from the families. And another thing that really is so cool to witness is healing, relationships. Whenever you have someone, when you feel like you're a part of a team, and you feel you're not just the sole care partner, walking through this. You have a team, you have hospice, and you have a doula and your family. It feels like it lightens the load. At least that's what I've experienced. The family seems more relaxed, more open when they have that support. When we did our restorative yoga teacher training, which I love doing restorative yoga with people at the end of life. But when we did that training, Lisa Bergley was our teacher, and she said, support creates release. And that is so true. It's true in restorative yoga, and it's true in end of life doula work. It's like when we are properly held, then we can process things, we can forgive, we can let go, we can realize that, everything is in this life is finite, but there is an eternal peace that lives within us that doesn't die. And that peace, I believe, it is always somewhere in the connection that you have with that loved one who is passing.
Beautiful. In my work as a geriatric pharmacist, I have seen that death is very medicalized, and we're always trying to avoid it. And I'm seeing the work of doulas as helping families be more accepting of death and to allow it to unfold as a more natural process and a part of life. And I know you've shared with me some stories of people that you have served and been with as they've crossed over, and you've shared some amazing things with me that it made me wonder, what are we missing when we medicalize death? What pieces are we missing out on? And so I'm wondering if you would share with us any of the stories of transition that left you with a lot of wonder, or just any of the particularly special moments that stand out that can help us understand what we might be gaining when we help our family members choose something like doula care in the end of life.
Oh yeah, it's pretty amazing. I think first, to go back to why we medicalize, I think if I can just say something briefly about that, it's I think it's largely because we're not as connected to the nature, like to the nature of things. Like everything is about longevity and about like stay alive at all costs. I mean, I'm not saying, this is a very general statement. I don't mean to like paint everybody with that brush, but I think that what we see in media, social media, and like on TV is like younger, better, faster, and we don't really have a culture that honors the transition or the changing. And I think it starts within us. And so for the people that I've worked with who seem to like really just embraced their own mortality, oh, it's just incredible. It's like, this one particular friend, she had done yoga therapy with me. You actually introduced me to her, and I'm forever grateful. She changed my life forever. And she started yoga therapy with me, and we began to work together at one level. And then by the time she transitioned, it was a whole new yoga. It was a whole nother way of connecting. And what I felt is zero fear in her. And I think that if there had been measures taken to try to keep her alive, it would have interrupted the beauty of that transition. And it was really quite beautiful. And almost down to the time where the hospice nurse came in and she said, "Angel, have you told her goodbye?" And I love hospice nurses because they just go there, You might want to like tiptoe around it, like, no, just, did you say goodbye to your friend? I was like, oh. And she said, "Everybody leave the room." And I mean, she snapped her finger and everybody got out. And she left me in there, and we had the most beautiful moment. I sang to her some songs that we sang, and I prayed with her. And I told her, I said, "Okay, I'll be back for yoga at 3:00, because we always did. I saw her in the morning, and then I would come back and do yoga with her in the afternoon. And I said, "Okay, I'll be back for yoga at 3:00. I believe it was 3:00, or it might have been 3:30. I don't know. But she was transitioning. She was actively dying. And I came back, and I got there. That's what it is. I got there at 3:27, and she transitioned within 2 or 3 minutes of me being there. I will never forget that. It was like, I couldn't have gotten a better gift from her. It was like the best gift. It was like, it was so peaceful. It was just, and her daughter was there, and her daughter-in-law was there, and it was incredible. It was just incredible. And I think if anything had come in to try and interrupt that, and I've also worked with people where it has been, a younger death, where it has been interrupted, and it's a different experience. I will say it stayed with me a whole lot longer, as far as like, it was painful. And I know it was extremely painful for the family. It's hard to lose somebody when they're young. I think that does play a huge role in it, in what we do medically. It's we don't want to be a people without hope, and we don't want to be a people without faith. And yet there's that moment where it just feels like it's time, and if that person can't say it, that's just really a hard situation. It's what I call an impossible situation. I think if we have these conversations more now, it's going to be more comfortable for, whatever the situation is, whatever the age is, it will be more comfortable if it was something that we talked about, but we just don't have a paradigm for that right now. I don't think. I think we're getting closer to
We're
that.
building it.
We're building it. Yeah, it's such an honor. I hope that was okay. I don't mean to, it can be painful whether they're old or young, but I certainly think that the younger, it's just different. There's a different dynamic there.
I think it brings in another element of grieving, because you're not just grieving the loss of the loved one when they're really young, you're also grieving the things that could have been. I think that there's that whole dynamic of thinking about all of the things that you don't get to experience with that person when they're leaving you at a younger age.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, or if they have young children, that's the thing. Yeah. And I just feel like it's easy to forget that there is this beautiful, perfect order. I heard a teacher once say, life takes care of life. And if we can just relax more into that, it was so hard. My pops died on January 10th of this year from COVID, and we weren't able to be with him, and so the thing that I love to do, I couldn't do. It wasn't even an option. And I had to grieve and work through that in a different way. And I had to show up for my mom in a different way. And it was different. It was hard. It was like learning something brand new. We just didn't know how to do it. We just, by grace, we did it. And that's why I say life really takes care of life, because even in the midst of that terrible phone call, there was still such a peace that permeated that whole apartment. And I realized that, we are not limited. This might sound really woo-woo, but we're not limited by space and time. And the people that we love, they know we're there, even when we're not. It's just a sense, a deep, subtle sense that we have that we're together. Especially, I felt that.
You mentioning that our loved ones are very aware of everything, and that space and time has no boundaries. Can you share with us a little bit about the doula work that you did with your aunt?
Yeah. Yeah. I gotta get grounded. Yeah. So my aunt developed a virus in her brain. It was September. I believe it was September. I don't know the exact date, but she started having seizures. This was right, obviously, in the midst of COVID. She was taken to Little Rock, which was the nearest major hospital. And for 8 weeks, she was there. And we all were praying, for her recovery. And we were still holding out hope that she was going to beat the virus. And all my prayers, all my meditations were going toward her, how I can support her from a distance. And so at that point, I thought, she's going to pass, and they're in Little Rock, and we're going to be here, But I envisioned, as I was praying and meditating, I envisioned me and my cousins and my stepmom all surrounding her and in Little Rock. And I just saw it. in my mind's eye. And I felt so much peace. I knew that she knew that we were there, even though she didn't have any brain, you know, it was encephalitis. And so she didn't have any brain function. So they said, well, she got transferred to Arkansas, where she's a smaller town in Arkansas where she's from. And we all got to be there and with her when she transitioned. And it was so wild because I'm standing there at one point. My cousin and I are painting her fingernails. And I'm just weeping because I'm like, this is exactly what I envisioned. What I envisioned is happening in real life. And so I just felt like that was like another gift, that we were given. She knew that we were there. It's like she tried to move her mouth. We felt that even though they said she didn't have any activity in her brain, there's some way that she was able to connect with us. And it hit me, and it made me so emotional because I'm like, here's my cousins over sitting in the chair, my stepmom's here, and then me and my other cousin are painting her fingernails. I mean, it was amazing. And those moments are, they don't make her absence, they don't make the grief any easier. My cousins, it's hard, it's hard for all of us. It's especially hard for my cousins and my stepmom and, and her husband. But you remember those little graces in the death process and how, even if I hadn't been able to get to Arkansas and be with her, I knew that moment of envisioning us being together was a real thing. And it was something that actually did come out in a full manifestation, which I don't know, have you all had that experience before? Like where you sense that someone needs your prayer or your connection and you call them, or we all have, right? Like that's the other thing too about doing any kind of doula work or end of life work or grief work is that it's a mystery. It's a mystery, and you have to remain really curious, I think, with it, and open. I think that's where things like that, I don't know that everybody's walking around like looking for it, but if you just look, it seems like it's just always there. Those little God winks or those little places that we're guided to that bring us into a deeper love or connection with each other at that time. I have one more story, and this is a really cool. I am so honored that I had this happen. So Mandy was in Wisconsin can I tell this story?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
With her grandmother, and she was transitioning, and Mandy was there with her. And I was here and I was teaching a yin class. And I believe it was a Saturday morning. Was it? I want to say it was a Saturday morning. And I was teaching a yin class. And when I close all of the classes, I always say a prayer. And I say, the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God is always watching over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. And when I started that prayer, I could not finish it. I got stuck. And I was like, and the whole community was surrounding, which you could just feel it. And I said, I looked over at, it was either Melody or Miriam, I can't remember, but I said, I think Mandy's grandmother's gone. And no sooner did I get out of that class and I heard from Mandy, and she had indeed passed away. And that's that connection that we all have. It's not special to me. It's not special. I mean, it's special, but it's not unique to me. But having that with my friend and feeling that our hearts were that in that type of oneness is something I'll just never forget that. It's beautiful.
And it sounds like that connection is something that you can facilitate for the family and help cultivate that if that's not already a part of their practice. Like that visualization that you described, that was really beautiful. And I imagine that would be very powerful for people that haven't thought to envision what it would be like if they can't physically be at the bedside. Can they envision that moment with their loved one, even if they can't physically be there, and how powerful that is, and that it really does send energy and create that reality, I guess, in another dimension, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful gift you're giving to families, helping them create rituals and being able to plan when things aren't going as planned.
Right. Yeah, totally. Do you guys have any questions or any comments or thoughts or insights?
I have a couple questions, Angel. I'm just curious, because Deaf Doula is becoming new and popular fast, which is great. I heard the term, I think only a couple months ago, but then I've heard it quite a few times since, which I'm really happy about, because I do have clients that choose to transition instead. And I want to be able to offer, like, not for me, but recommend that service, just because I've been through a similar situation, losing my father, and I would have paid a lot of money to have somebody walk me through that process, because it can be quite scary, traumatizing. Because like Veronica said, it's just not talked about. It's so mechanical, so medical, transactional. Whoop, they're gone. And it's like, it's so not like that. And so I'm curious, like with a death doula, is it, how soon are you invited into this journey? Is it, while they're in hospice? Is it before hospice? Is it, the last 24 hours? And how are you able to understand, because some people think that, and sometimes it is, but people think that death is just like, poof, like, 1 minute they're walking, especially with terminal illness, as I'm sure you've seen, they think that, oh, they have stage 4 cancer and they could just go any second. And there's definitely this progression. And, and I'll share definitely my journey, is that we knew the week of, because we were educated enough. But it's difficult because I don't think people are educated in that it's not just this, okay, you have terminal cancer, stage 4, or whatever it is, the ailment is, go home and die. And it's not like they're going to die in their sleep that night. There is a progression in the body shuts down. So I'm just curious, at what part do you enter the journey? And I'd love to understand a little bit more of how specific, because you said you do breath work and yoga and that stuff. And do you educate the family on what it looks like? So there's a bunch of questions, but what part do you enter the journey?
So it does vary. I would say it depends. I've worked with someone in palliative care all the way to the end of life, which, palliative care, I mean, that for this particular patient was like 18 months. And so you kind of lay this foundation, which is, I really like, because it's like you're getting them familiar with these new terms. Like it's easy to think that everybody knows how to connect with their breath. Are you like, but it's not so, you know what I mean? So if you have some time, most of the people that I've worked with are just getting on hospice. And then in some cases, 3 or 4 people I've worked with it's been a long-term care situation all the way to the end of life. But I mean, there are people that just specialize in holding vigil, you know. But for me, I want to build that relationship. To me, that's what it's all about. It's building that relationship.
Holding,
and helping.
When you say holding, just for terms sake, holding vigil, that would be the last 72 hours, 48 hours. Is that about right?
Yeah, like the last 72 hours, when you know that death is imminent. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that person is, they're not being fed or anything like that. So, yeah, it's so true. It can really be, you have to really develop. This is not my strong suit, I will say. Being a doula has helped me with this, and being a yoga therapist has helped me with this. But I'm not a naturally patient person. That's my fiery nature just doesn't roll that way all that much. I mean, I like to get in there and get things done. And in that space, it's like you said, it can be very slow, and it can seem like the person is coming back, and then a few days later they regress, and that can be quite the emotional roller coaster for the family. And I mean, you guys, I feel so passionate about bringing yoga to end of life care, because it's like, it's so, it's not a head thing. Dying is not something that happens up here. It happens in the whole body, right? So these things are changing in the body. There's things every day that someone might be letting go of. Maybe they start losing their ability to control their bowels. I mean, there's so much in there that changes in the physical body, and it can be very emotional. And so I think yoga therapy lends itself to this work, because it addresses not only the physical body, but the emotional body, the mental body, and the spiritual body, and the energy body. So we hone our skills at being receptive to how the energy is changing. You can feel the energy changing. For those of you who've been in a situation, right? Like, you could tell that something changed. And I think that all of us have that sensitivity. We just need to tune it a little bit more, because we haven't had that exposure. I mean, I grew up my first loss was at 8 years old, and it was my stepsister. And I remember she died suddenly in a car accident, but we really didn't talk about it. Like, she was just gone. And it was, strange as a child. And then, the first job I had was cleaning houses for these, what I affectionately call little old ladies. And there was one lady that had lost her husband, and they didn't have any children. And every week that I went to clean her house, she would sob. She was grieving so hard. And I was 12. I had no tools. I did not know. I sat there and listened to her. And then I would just be like trying to get to the fancy, dining room so I could dust. But, and so I think education is so important, like education about, like, with our children, even like starting them out at a young age of, like, the cycles of life, not being fearful about talking about that. And being a doula, I don't want to just go to every party and talk about that. Like, I want, you can't just talk about that, but you have to have fun. And that's the other thing I wanted to say, you guys, and maybe you've had this experience, is there's so many moments of laughter that can happen, you know, because it just like sits right there next to our sadness. And oh, there's nothing like it. It's like laughter really is the best medicine. And if we could just learn in our own process of how to not take it, you know, take it so seriously, and just, you know, let that energy flow, let that laughter come, or let those tears come without trying to pin it down or think that we shouldn't say this or that. I love the nurses who bring that. You know, there's a lot of hospice nurses they are still sensitive, but they bring that lightness, and you'll feel that. And I've learned a lot from watching hospice nurses work. Excuse me. And it's really cool. Did that answer your question at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it really depends on you know, the doula and the situation of when they come in, but
Absolutely, it does. It depends on that and what that person's availability is. I mean, I own Temple Road Journey, which is like yoga. I do a lot of yoga therapy out in the community, and so if I were to take on someone and hold vigil, that's not where I market myself necessarily as a doula. I'm more like long-term relationship, palliative care, and just being put on hospice is really where I like to go in and work. Because you have time then, you know, to build a relationship and establish some breath practices or movement practices that they may have never done before, you know, and they may not want to. And if they don't want to, then they don't. But it's offering that option. Just putting your hands on their shoulders or on their heart, or, you know, holding their hand and breathing with them is huge.
That's what excites me the most about your doula offerings is that they're starting, or you're wanting to involve the patient and the family so much earlier than, and there's nothing wrong with other, you know, doula processes, but I think that's what I love so much about your work, is that you're looking for that long-term relationship to build those skills and build on their ability to use that mind-body connection all the way to the end, and really fine tune it. And I think that's where you excel, and that's what's so exciting about the work that you're bringing to the world, is that we want this goodness earlier, so that we can have the best ending, because the earlier we get these tools and these skills of the mind-body connection and the embracing of the mortality, the better and more peaceful the ending can be for everyone, not just the patient, but the family too, because you're giving these skills not just to the patient and the person who's transitioning, but to the family as well. I mean, the breath work is huge. And what a gift to be able to tap in to the relaxation responses that are built into our bodies, and to learn how to access those.
Yeah, it is truly amazing. And to answer your question about like working with families versus the person who's dying, that was a question that you had. How do you say your name?
Shireen.
Shireen. Yeah, so that question you had about, do I work with and ideally it's both, but sometimes it doesn't work that way because the care partners are so exhausted. They might need respite when you're there, when I'm there. And so they'll go and grocery shop or get their nails done or whatever. And so that really does depend, you know. I love working with husbands and wives. That to me is like, it's so beautiful. You see them grow in their love in this time that's really difficult, and that's the ideal situation for me, you know, just to sort of encourage that connection. breathing together, just sitting back to back even, and just breathing together. And it's very powerful.
I have to run, but I've really enjoyed this, and
I'm so glad you were here,
I will
Shireen.
definitely see you guys all in the next month. And if anybody wants to contact me, you can check me out on Instagram or get a hold of Veronica. Happy to give my information away. But I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. I have Shireen's website posted in the event tab for next month. So guys, be sure go to the website and register so that you can hear Shireen's story, and she's going to share with us about conscious grieving. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for being here. Bye.
I'm so glad you guys get to meet her. She's really amazing, and I got to meet her on Clubhouse in a room when I was the guest speaker for Women in Healthcare Spill the Tea, and we were talking about embracing mortality. And I had the opportunity to meet her, and she shared her beautiful story with us. So
I can't wait to hear it. I'll be on here next month to hear that.
She's coming back next month to share with all of you. And I'm sure I'm going to get extra goodies that I didn't get, when we were on Clubhouse. So, because there's something about face-to-face. That's what I love about this, is getting to see everyone's faces. The face-to-face connection definitely offers something extra to the interaction.
I agree.
I've got to ask, since you're saying face to face, can y'all see me? Or is it just that little round head and
It says
shoulders?
iPad, Barb.
But it's just not me. I have to turn it on to record, I think, to make it so y'all can actually see me. But it's not that I want to record it particularly, but I think that's the only way I can get it to do that. Like now, see, I can see myself.
I don't know, that's interesting.
Yeah,
You're
she jumped
Peppy.
in love. Yeah, we're very close. But I think all this is so interesting, and just saying, it amazes me through the history of all of mankind that's ever been alive that we've not come any further than we have about looking at death. Most cultures, or a lot of cultures, have specific ways of doing it, and the European Americans are just more like put it off until the last minute, until the thing's going to happen, and then they think, oh my God, they're going to die, and we got to, as opposed to letting it happen in a more natural sense, and just taking care of our older people to realize we're all going to be there. You all get to that point. Yeah, it's not fun getting old sometimes, but it beats the alternative, is what I think, because I enjoy every day I'm alive. So but to think that society as a whole, people as a whole, it's just little pockets of people might make up certain ways of viewing death and dealing with it. But generally, it's not something that's really talked about enough to make people comfortable with it. Because my husband's sitting in there, they're going, they talking about dying again? Yeah, the first meeting, and we were laughing, weren't we, Veronica? And he was like, well, you were laughing. And I said, well, yeah, it's still, something you do. There are lots of because it's neat and things to talk about and ways to feel, and laughter is part of it too. So anyway, I think it's really interesting. I think you're doing a great job. That would be something that, I could see. I would like that. My husband would he'd be one of those good, but go ahead, somebody else.
That's so cool. I know, it's like you're laughing, like you can't laugh. And whenever I was earlier, I had a meeting with my assistant, and I was talking, and I was writing and about kind of this talk, and I was like, yeah, you just have to think outside the box. And she goes, yeah, the box. Yes, the box.
I want to share with you guys a really fun story, if I can. My grandmother, she knew very clearly that she did not want to die in the hospital. And she had gone to the emergency room for some chest pains. They told her she was having a heart attack. She was 91 years old. And she said, send me home and call hospice. And I don't want any more procedures. Okay, we know this is serious. And, you know, I'm clear. I'm going to go home and die. And we got 2 more weeks with her. And while we were there, my son, he was probably 2 at the time, goes to the top of the stairs, and my uncle doesn't have any carpet in his house except on the stairs for safety. And he goes to the top of the stairs and pees all down the stairs like a fire hose. I am just, like, oh my gosh, I'm raising a feral child. And I just think this is the worst thing my kid could have ever done. And then I see the next day after this had happened, my grandmother's sitting up in the bed. She's kind of like braced with her arms and her face is kind of twisted. And I'm like, oh, Grandma, are you in pain? Are you okay? And she says, no, I'm laughing. I'm thinking about what Ian did. And it just really tickled me. And, we had several moments like that where we were just remembering stories and things that had just happened. And she wouldn't have been able to witness that and be there to see Ian and all his display had she been in the hospital recovering from whatever procedure they wanted to do for the heart attack. And that was just such a fun and memorable moment. And her favorite meal was meatloaf. And before we drove up to Colorado to see her, I made meatloaf and mashed potatoes, and we shared that together. And it was really fun. And so thank you for letting me share that little piece of laughter.
That's beautiful. That's so great. So great. Does anybody else have anything to share or offer or say or?
That's one nice thing about being able to face things, because you do pick up a lot of energy from other people, I think, being able to do that. I am at a part of my life, I'm 68 years old and really enjoying life. I mean, it's good. This year was hard, but it was really good too, to have that time with my husband, to realize I was just out of the house all the time and just busy running here and there, thinking I had to be somewhere with people and seeming like I cared more about other people than him. And it's really brought me down to what is important, and so that's a very neat thing that did happen over this last year. But think about a lot of what you're talking about sometimes includes a lot of religious stuff. Do you hear that? When you talk about God's grace and God's this and God's that, I am at a point in my life where I'm beginning to wonder, because I don't think there's all this planning going on out there. I'm beginning to think it, just like they say, it happens. Things happen, and I just don't. I guess I'm already to that point of I'm not sure anymore if there is a God, because would that God be the one who decided this should happen? No, I don't think so. If he was a good kind, the New Testament God, if he was the Old Testament God, well, maybe so. But does it always include religious? And there's a difference between spiritual, I think, and religion. Maybe that's my point.
Absolutely. And I so appreciate you saying that, because it's about, for me, of course, my faith is central, but it's not always. I don't work with people who share my faith. I work with some people who don't, or don't believe, or they don't. That's not, nothing about that is like odd or in that process. I think that's natural for some people to just not have that. And what I feel like it comes down to, if this makes sense, is love. It comes down to relationship. And so even if God doesn't fit and that doesn't work, then I completely honor that. that person's belief, but it's the love I feel that is real, that you meet in those moments. And it's love is, it doesn't have a religion, I mean, like they say, Bob Marley, I guess, said love is my religion. It's my spirituality. Love is my spirituality. I'm more interested in love than I am anything, and that's what I want my life to be a reflection of, is that love, because in my faith that God is love. And so it's just it's cool to know that we can hold different beliefs and still meet in this space together.
Well, that's something I wonder about. Even the hospice that we had for my father, they offered some religious person to come by and be with him, and that's what my dad wanted and would need. We really thought that was a good thing for him, but for me and mine, it's not the religion, it's the love, that because I still, every person in my family, as different as they are, I love them to pieces, and that's where I'm going to go on, is through them, because I don't think as long as they can remember me, then, and brings a thought to their head, that little flicker of something, the grandma, and now I'm a great grandma, will still be important in this world, and that too will lose its own time, because nobody remembers your great 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 grandmother. I mean, there's just not that kind of passage from one family to another. It's hard enough to keep the things that we pass on, from one generation to another. I mean, it changes all the time, but that to me is the most important thing too, the love that we share.
Yeah.
I know I talk a lot, but you can tell me to hush. My dad had a 3-month colon cancer. Living at home, he was able to do that. We were able to have people with him, and then hospice and everything. And it's he kind of waited for my brother to get there, type thing. We were all around him, and that was really nice, because it was his time. He was, it was done, and I think we all felt good about that. I know I did, but I've been there a whole lot. Then my brother, he said my dad died 3 months ago when he got the diagnosis. And I just looked at him. I said, I just almost couldn't believe he said that. I mean, it's just, to me, that was so harsh, because I said, that's your dad in there, just like he was before. Just because he's sick, or was very sick, that's still a person that took care of you and helped to make you who you are. So I'm sorry you had to feel that way, because you lost a lot not being here, through the last 3 months, and being able to understand that. My brother's a different kind of person. But then when my mother died, we had very little warning. She had me come to get her, because she couldn't get up off the bed in the morning. And I said, I'm calling an ambulance to come get you, because she's a very strong woman. And they came to transport her to the hospital, and she had cancer. We've come in the next 3 days, we found out it was from head to toe, starting with breast cancer. And she lasted 1 week. And of all the people I would have loved to have been there with, was her. But I didn't get to be. I came home and went to bed. It was 11:30 that night when she died, and I had gone to bed, because I just couldn't believe she would be passed that quickly. But the other part of me, after all these years, has said, that's the way she was. She didn't want all this going on around her, or big to-dos about stuff. So I think that was her way of passing, was okay, I'm in this room alone now. And the hospice person was there. They just given her some Novocaine and stuff like that to keep her comfortable. And she just, this is very quiet. But I wish I could have been with her. I just would have liked to have kept touching her hand or something. But that's not the way it works. We don't get to choose. Yeah. Go ahead.
I wanted to circle back on something that Shireen had mentioned. She had said that she feels like there's not a lot of information about the process of dying, and how people are just like, oh, they could go at any minute and it's just going to happen instantly or in their sleep. And then for most, that's not the case, that there is this definite process and progression, and there's definite signs and symptoms that death is imminent. And it really got me to thinking about that process. And just with my dog Yankee, he's 12, and I had a dog that literally collapsed and died. And I realized I was projecting that fear on this dog. I'm just like, oh my gosh, when's it going to happen? When's his end going to be? And I've had to go back and kind of educate myself on the signs and symptoms, and reviewing things with the vet. And he needed this. Some of you know he had big surgery, and I almost was like, we're not going to do this big invasive surgery if he's so close to death. And we had to review, like, he's not close to death. I mean, he doesn't have any of these signs. He's still eating, he's still drinking, he's real excited about things. It's okay to do this surgery, because it really is going to give him quality of life. And really having to wrestle with this big medical decision, because when I think about things in terms of people, I always think, is it going to give them quality of life? And I'm always thinking about, what are we doing? Is it adding to the quality of life? We don't have to be so focused on quantity as long as it's quality. And so we decided to do this surgery for the dog, because I had to get over that fear and really realize he's got quite a bit of life left in him. He's old and he's got a lot going on, but I needed to do something for his quality of life. And I'm sharing that with you because I don't happen to have a people example at the moment. But Yankee's doing well, and his balance is better since we got rid of this terrible pressure in his head. He's eating better. He's standing better. I mean, he was still eating good, but he was throwing food everywhere, because he would put his head down and the pressure was so bad, it would put him off balance and he couldn't hold the things in his mouth. So, so thank you for listening to me on that.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that Shireen brought it up, because I've definitely had to go through that, just with my dog, and realize, like, he's not going to collapse and die. There is a process to things, and he's not showing any of those signs. He's still got a lot of life left, and we need to love on him and do the things that are going to give him quality, and take him to Sonic for some ice cream tomorrow.
Yeah. He's earned it.
So I'm going to say something that's not really fair, Angel. So I know that this is about being a death doula and helping transition. And a lot of what we've talked about is the natural process. And a lot of what we've talked about is older folks and the natural process, or chronically ill. So I deal with a lot of people that are not, it's not natural, like, per se, it's usually pretty tragic. And you don't get that opportunity often to be, like, no one is with them when they pass. So is there something that you can do or offer or think about, or even as a death doula or transition, to help the families, or to do a visualization, or to do something to help grieve, or kind of, you can't, like, reverse it, right? But, like, to help through that process a little bit, even after it finished. Does that make sense? Or what can you do? There's my question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's tricky because everybody grieves in a different way. And I think the best thing that I could say is meeting them where they are, and also encouraging them that things will change, like, you know, just encouraging them, like getting them to notice what is already changing. And I'm reading this book called Option B. It's a good book, Mandy, you might enjoy it. And it's Nancy, do you remember what that girl's name is? I can't remember. She's the Facebook, like, I've got it in there, but anyway, the book is called Option B, and her husband died suddenly while they were on vacation. And she talks about the 3 P's that her therapist introduced her to. Let me go grab that real quick. Oh, because I think it's important to read that.
Sandberg is her last name.
Yeah.
Cheryl Sandberg. Is it Cheryl? It's been a while since I read it.
But the main thing that I thought about, Mandy, when you mentioned that, is the permanence of it. You know, like that's one thing I've dealt with, you know, the losses in our lives, is it's so final, and you want it to not be so final. You don't want to think that you're never going to touch their skin or hug them, and there's no sidestepping that pain. It's so real and it's visceral. But one thing that she talks about is that when you look back, things have changed. Like as time goes on, you see that it's not permanent. Your pain is not, it changes. Grief moves through you. I'm trying to find the, this part, chapter 1 is breathing again. You know, I think that's like foundational, right?
Well, Mandy, since I've had that situation
Yes.
with the death of my daughter, never was there until I saw her in the casket. I don't know that, I think if I had Angel and you to show up for me. But that was a year after that, maybe a year and a half after she had died. I think early on, if I had just had the support and somebody to be there to talk to and to teach me how to breathe, to teach me how to get back into my body, because by then the grief is so bad by the second year that I think you do disconnect from that body side. And that's what yoga brought to me personally. So that helps any, but I think if there are people to educate us, because it's all about how we were raised, how society looks at death and avoids it, and it makes you feel so alone. That you're the only person going through this, and you know you're not logically, but you can't find anybody else going through this. And then since every situation's unique, every emotion's unique about that person, that relationship, I think just if we have an opportunity to share that with somebody else, and I was able to do that with you two at some point during my journey, and it's been a definite journey. Does that answer your question? It's just what is needed by the doulas to understand, to work, if you're working with a family, to reconnect with yourself, because you lose yourself during your grief.
I have a friend that lost her son 30 years old, 30 something, early 30s. And it was an accident. Boom, he was gone through an explosion. And she's having a terrible time with it. And that I can't fathom losing your child. I'm sorry, Nancy. It's just,
Thank you.
it's got to be the worst I can think of in my life is to lose a child. Is there any book, something that I could tell my friend about? Do you have a suggestion of something? Because she's truly every, 3 days on the internet, on Facebook saying, I can't breathe. I can't sleep. I can't, I just want to scream and things like it's that, that hard. And he was a
One
twin.
thing is a child, there's a support groups for compassionate friends is one of them. David Kessler's website that he started during COVID with so many deaths happening and people having no place to grieve because we can't grieve in community right now. That's an excellent website.
Could you give me that name again? Or
David Kessler, Angel, do you
Right.
remember? It's Mandy, you see it too. It's grief, remembering grief. I just click
Yeah.
on it all the time.
If you go to Facebook and you search David Kessler, it'll come up.
Yeah, it'll come up.
I think that's
So
K.
it's a Facebook page. It's a good place for her to even go out and tell about her story without anybody judging her.
Yeah,
and
without people
other
that have
people
known her
supporting
in
her.
their
So
relationship with
that's
the kid.
kind of a start because of COVID right now, and a lot of books. There's tons of books. I think I've got 1 million books in my bookcase. So,
That's what I was. Yeah, if you have at least a couple that.
Bearing the Unbearable is a really good one. I've got trying to think of some of the other names. I've read so many of them.
I've read.
I appreciate that.
I'm currently reading It's Okay That You're Not Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And she has, I think, an Instagram that's been really helpful for one of my clients. She actually I've got some people, and that David Kessler Facebook group page can be overwhelming.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah. And compassionate friends can be too. I went to their meetings for a while because I needed that early on assurance I was not alone. And then once, I think that can be overwhelming of hearing the stories from so many people. And I don't know, everybody has their own way of grieving and they need certain kinds of support. I went as long as I needed it. And same thing with David Kessler. Yeah, I kind of liked reading that I'm still not alone, but there comes a point that I quit watching it unless there's something that comes on up about, I don't know, something that'll trigger me in the title or that they're saying. And when I log on to Facebook, but normally I don't read them. But early on, you kind of need some of that because you do feel alone. And so I think it's okay early on, and you'll come to the point where that's enough. I think I'm thinking I understand this now, because we don't understand what's going on with these emotions we're having, and we think they're going to last forever, and they don't.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is the excellent point, Nancy, that the emotions don't last forever. And that, the way that I know, Mandy, the way that you work people is to meet them where they are and then help them, move through it. And it's starting to realize, oh, this is shifting. It's even noticing that it's shifting and not putting a story on top of it that it's never going to change, because that's just not the reality. The reality is that everything that we see is actually changing. And so I love that, what you said, Nancy, about knowing when it was time for that door to close and you did something else. And I think that's a lot of it, is just sensing into what do I need in this season of my grief journey or whatever.
Thank you.
Sensitive to that.
And I'm not saying it doesn't get bad. We still will always have holidays. We have anniversaries. But now I know that those are times of remembrance and a time to honor. And it's going to pass. I mean, you know, it's from November through March for me, when there's something special every month. And so I know it's a hard time and not every day is bad. But again, that can be 3-4 years down the road before that you get to that point. And in between that, between the death and that period of time, it's having people that will listen and having people that will sometimes even educate you about, this is normal to feel this way. This is nothing abnormal. And it's a gift.
And not trying to like fix.
Right. It's active. Do it as if it has been given to you for a purpose. We have to befriend them, all those emotions.
Don't you think it's so awesome, you guys, to cultivate friendships that can hold you in that space of deep, deep pain and rage and anger? And, you know, I'm feeling like more and more, I just want to shout it from the rooftops and just say, you know, it is okay to not be okay. And you can be not okay with me and I'll be there, you know. And can we like be that person for someone? As I've had so many people in my life that do that for me, even now, like just, it's beautiful. And it requires that we stretch ourselves, and it's uncomfortable, especially for those of us who are brought up as fixers, you know?
Yeah.
I was listening to the Endwell Project. They have really great resources on grief, death, dying. The Endwell Project has great YouTube videos and things, but I was listening to their Clubhouse channel, and they were talking about grief, and they gave a really great explanation of grief, that it never really goes away, that it ebbs and flows, and you think of it like waves, and there's times when the waves are big and they feel like they're really knocking you down, and that's a time to let yourself be carried and just float and know that calmer waves, calmer seas are coming. And those really turbulent times, sometimes we can predict, or we learn what brings those on, and other times they seem to come out of nowhere, but there is always calm that comes somewhere. But grief, I wrote a quote down. I wonder if I have it. Getting good at grieving means at the end we can look back on a life well lived. And so if we're grieving something, it means that we love something really deeply, and it's something that ebbs and flows and changes, and like you said, Nancy, it won't always be as intense.
That's
And
right.
did you say the Endwell Project is, how do you get a, could she get a hold of it?
Endwellproject.org, I think.
Okay.
It's a great website. I love that project. It's so good for this movement that we're talking about here.
Mhm.
They had a lot of really good resources and talks on their conference this year, which they made virtual and free. It's called Take 10. And if you just Google the Endwell Project Take 10, you can go and view those interviews with people. And they had really great topics over grief and caregiving and palliative
It's
care.
Oh,
Yeah, it's so worth taking if you are working with people who are grieving in any what capacity or you're grieving. It's worth it to like take those little they're like little 20 or 30-minute trainings by experts. I was so enriched by those. I was like, you think, how many different ways can you talk about this? And then you see these people and you're like, God, there's a lot of different ways to approach this,
mhm.
which is kind of exciting in a way because it shows that the communities are coming together to be creative around how we support each other in this process of dying. I was blown away by it.
They have a really good reading list too. I'm working my way through all their recommended readings. I've
Oh, I-
purchased most of them on audiobooks. There's a few outliers that aren't available on audiobook that I'm gonna have to dig in and read.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
That's impressive. I think it sounds like something where there's different options to look at. So she wouldn't, you know, where you were saying the David Kessler can be a bit much after a while, or, when you come and go, where this other might be an in-well project. Where you can pick up pieces here and there. Because when you think about it, every time you listen to something tonight or in this or any other thing, if your brain can withhold, just a few facts, just a few things, that's an accomplishment for yourself. I mean, that's the way it goes, to be able to just use a little bit of what you found out and then that's what you remember. And then to use one of those facts or steps or whatever is a major thing. So I'm definitely gonna let her know about this. She's still in the hard depths of it, but it was in December, so it hasn't been very long.
I know everyone grieves differently, and my aunt lost her son his senior year of high school, and I was really, I don't know the right word for it, but I remember being at her house and she was pretty hysterical, and someone had said, well, the doctor can give you, something for that. Like, I don't know if they were suggesting Ambien or lorazepam for sleep. And she said, no, I have to feel all of this. And I remember thinking, wow, that's really wise.
Brave.
Yeah. Because, I cannot imagine.
No.
I cannot imagine. And I thought, I don't know, I thought that was just really wise for her to go, I've got to feel all of this. And I think she knew at the start of her journey that it wasn't going to be that way forever. And she was prepared to ride the wave.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many years has that been now, Veronica?
Oh gosh, it's been more than 10.
How is her journey now?
I think it's good. She now has grandbabies, and since I'm not there, we've moved away and we don't see her as often at family gatherings. I don't know if I have the opportunity to see when there would still be moments of sadness, but when I do get to see her, things seem as normal as they can be for being one family member short.
Mhm.
It'd never be the same.
No.
Never the same. Yeah.
And I think that they celebrate and carry on, and I know I see them, particularly his sister. She's always posting at different anniversaries her remembrance of her brother.
Mm. So sweet.
Mm-hmm. But remembering them is like including them, and they're gone, but they're not gone. They're still in your heart.
Mom, I want oatmeal today.
Thank you, sweet pea.
You know, that's the sudden, if something happens to you, because we had that terrible car wreck back in 2003. And ever since then, I've really thought every time somebody I love leaves the room, no, not quite leaves the room, but leaves the house, it's the last thing I want them to hear from me is I love you.
Mm.
I just, that's real important for me to say those words and to let them know that be safe and I love you, you know, because you just don't know when it could be the last one, you know, and that's just something that has gotten to be very, very important. And I hope it continues, you know, and they're doing it now. They turn around because we used to not just not say that, you know, bye mom, see you later. Yeah. Instead of I love you. And it brings us closer. Yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions or anything that they would like to share?
I do wish, Angel, you would have a class on some of your doula experience and how us as teachers can help other people that are in the process of death, and whether it be family or, and some of the things that you talked about I really enjoyed because I did know exactly what you did, but other than what we did at Miriam's, and I don't know, I'd like to know more about it is through the hospice work that you do.
Yeah. They usually send me with people who they feel would be open to breath work and a little bit of movement. They try to be, you know, mindful of that, and they'll call me for someone who thinks that, and this is what I usually hear, they would be perfect for you know, yoga or this work. So yeah, I will. And I think that again, like tying it into the natural process of life, because even in yoga we have a shavasana, like we practice dying every yoga class, like literally. That's why shavasana is so important, and I feel like I'm always preaching that don't shortchange yourself in not taking that shavasana, because that is the practice of letting go.
Right.
And I've seen the power of that, you know, the benefit of someone being in shavasana that I've worked with and then doing Reiki while they're in shavasana. You know, she could be there for 30 minutes and never move a muscle. You know, that's how relaxed she would get. And I remember when she died, I thought she's been practicing that, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she had. But it was nice to be able for us both to touch her feet. You know, we held her feet and we prayed over her during that time and basically sent Reiki to
Yeah,
her.
we
For the
anointed
energy to
her.
move on. It was an energy to move on when she felt it was right to move on, is almost how I felt like she knew, even though she was not consciously aware, but there's something innately beautiful about what they do know, that you feel it.
Totally, totally.
There's that interaction with them, and they just know. And you know, they know, like what happens with your aunt.
And then just the tears,
Mm-hmm.
you know, just tears, like more than just my eyes are watering, but just tears streaming down her face when me and my brother and my cousin started singing to her. I mean, that all that stuff matters at the end. If you know, it is terrible for those people, I mean, in some ways, who don't get that opportunity to say goodbye. And that's why, you know, it is so important to say I love you, like you said, you know, Brenda, and let people know, like, don't hold back what you feel about someone. Tell them what they mean to you. You know, Angela hugged me the other day and she said, I cherished you. I was like, you cherish me? You know, it was just like, I don't know if anybody's ever really said that like that in real life, you know? But I was like, that's amazing. I cherish you too, you know?
And you know, when we can't say goodbye to the person that has died, Angela, it's the same situation with her
That's right.
mother. I mean, there comes a time when we have to, and that's another thing that people don't know about. Why can't we? I mean, we do need to write them a letter. We do need to talk to them as if they're in the wrong room, to be able to say, I'm sorry you had to die. And I'm sorry I had to not be there with you, or that you couldn't live that I couldn't bury you, and, you know, from an illness or something, that we got to be given permission to do that. Somebody has to tell us to do that. I mean, eventually you kind of learn that, but that's years down the road, and the suffering is so difficult and it's so heartbreaking. And so why do you have to wait quite that long? If I think I had done that a lot sooner, written my story of my relationship with my daughter, told her how angry I was, told her I forgave her, would she forgive me? Just what has happened all through life between us. If I had just done that early on, I think that would have been a really good beginning for healing for me, instead of doing it 5 years later.
That's beautiful.
And I could still write those stories, you know, like, I wish I had grandkids. I wish you had gotten married and had grandkids. And I miss those things, but I can still talk to her, and I still do.
Yeah, I still talk to my mom all the time.
But, you know, a lot of people don't know that some people just avoid the conversation because they think they're dead. And they're not dead in our hearts. They still live on, and we can still acknowledge that.
Or like, you know, I think that at first it's hard to like really accept that they're dead, or they're gone, or they're not on this plane anymore. And then the minute you shift the relationship to spiritual, then it's like more real. So it's like a process.
Yeah,
in my
for
experience.
sure.
Yeah.
I love that you shared that, speaking your story and saying that, Nancy. That is something that I'm currently learning, just for other parts of my healing journey, not necessarily connected to loss, but to be able to have those conversations and just shift the energy around all of it by speaking it out and having that conversation, even if it's physical, like I guess in reality it's a one-way conversation, but then it's really not. You know, you're having that exchange and rewiring the emotions and the process. And I think it's so great that you bring that up, because I'm learning this for other things and hadn't thought about the connection to loss and grief. And I think that's so powerful. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, write letters. I mean, why not? I might burn my letters someday, but I can write them.
Mhm.
I can tell her what's going on in my life.
Mhm.
I think it's so powerful to speak it into existence, or in your case, you're writing it in, you know, and it's happening and it's transforming and changing.
Yeah, and to be able to write it or say it, whatever you do, to say that hurt, you know, your passing hurt me, and why did you go, and didn't you should have done something different to make yourself last longer, whatever. But because humans are not perfect, you know, they just make their way through their lives the best they can, and then things happen to you that you have no control over. Yeah, so but being
Yeah,
able
and your friend needs to start writing a journal of all those feelings, because I can guarantee you a year later, you read back through them and you'll be in a little bit different place. And the next year, I reread mine every once in a while and I think, whoa, you know, how dark that place was. And then that way you can see progress, and you know that you haven't been stuck where you were. It's literally the grief itself has changed. It's metamorphosed into something else. And you don't know that until you look back, because you're kind of in a brain fog and you don't really remember what it was that first year or two. I always say the second year's worse, because I was in shock for the first year.
I can see that. Well, she's such a bubbly, alive person. I hate to see the things around her change. You know, her marriage, her other kids, her grandchildren, his children. You know.
And the other thing too, I don't know if she works, but that's difficult. You know, I had to go back to work 5 days.
Oh gosh.
And how do you function back into a job and talking about what you talk about? For me, it's cost and schedules, as if nothing had happened, because nobody else wants to hear your problems. So those are compounded problems of just living that we have to deal with. And we click it on and off. We click that grief on and off. And so when you don't deal with the grief, it's just not good. You're going to pile that stuff up, and eventually you'll break down over it. At least I did.
Yeah.
Many times, but
I just worry about her. I think about her and I think about what she's going through, and it's
just be there for her.
Yeah.
Let her tell her story. Let her tell her story 1,000 times to you. You don't have to say a word. All it takes is to listen to her. She doesn't need any comments or suggestions. She just needs somebody to talk to.
Yeah, don't try to fix it.
Nope.
You can't.
And I'm a fixer too, so yeah. I couldn't fix this.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I've enjoyed tonight. I'm getting
She's got a good friend.
So I think I'm gonna have to peel off here because my head's starting to stop up even more. So thank you all, and Veronica, thank you.
Thank you.
I want to say quick, happy birthday tomorrow, Angel.
Thank you.
Happy your birthday tomorrow.
You are the first person to tell me happy birthday.
Yay! Yay!
A win for Bandy Jordan.
Yay, I'll take it.
Angel, can I ask you how old you're going to be?
49.
Really?
No way.
Yeah. I'm like, God.
We
You
got
look
a
so
big
frightened.
party next year. Good Lord willing.
Look at it. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Love you guys. Thank you, Veronica,
Enjoyed it.
for hosting me. And I hope that anything I said, I don't know, was helpful, but I appreciate you all so much.
Yeah.
And your
Thanks,
beautiful
Really
Veronica
sharing.
good
and
conversation
Angel.
tonight. Thank you, all of you, for joining, holding space, sharing your stories. I really appreciate it. And I think that people are going to be really excited to watch the replay and know that we have people like Angel or other death doulas to help us in this process, and that we don't have to wait until there's a diagnosis or something happens, that we can start talking about it now, and it doesn't invite anything terrible. By talking about death doesn't mean we're inviting it. It just means that we have an opportunity to write our stories the way that we want to when we can talk about it, and there's nothing hush hush. So thank
Happy to everybody. Yeah.
yeah. So
Okay.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
You too.
Mwah. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thanks.